The challenge that I'm having in answering this question is I don't want to devalue the humanity of people who are disabled. And there are plenty of folks who talk about their strengths and their growth that they have been able to do as a result of the work that really just has been put on their plate or dealt them in their hand, and they can go on to become very inspirational. And it's a challenge balancing these things. So it's a hard question to talk about.
Welcome to the show, where we explore God, life, the afterlife, spirituality, and the perplexities of the human experience from a Swedenborgian perspective. This is Big Spiritual Questions. In this episode, we asked, why does God permit disabilities in people?
Heavy, challenging, difficult question when you think about there's this eternal God who cares about each of us and has this sort of end in view of a heaven for each of us, and works to protect us is the imagery that we're given in the Bible. And then we see people who are born or who have things happen in their lives that really limit their ability to move through this world that God created in the first place. And then you wonder, God, are you working at cross purposes here? Are you paying attention? I know that there are some people who talk about it this way, where they think that the Lord is testing, that they won't give people challenges greater than they can handle, and some people can handle greater challenges than others. But that's not the whole purpose of the world that God created. God didn't create this world to be the greatest possible misery without breaking us. And so I don't personally take on that mindset.
And so the question is, why were they born perhaps without the full array of options that other people have? We can just leave it at that. And we all see that we live in an imperfect universe. It's governed by natural laws of physics. We can all have an effect on this world. You can punch people, you can pull chairs out from underneath, and we can have negative effects on each other. But in a bigger sense, the universe is not perfect. It's not a perfect reflection of what we want, or I think of what the Lord wants. And that's because the only thing that is perfect is the Lord. So we shouldn't be surprised that nothing else is.
The situation seems to run so counter to what we expect God to create, if God's all-powerful, if God's almighty. The writings for the New Church tell us that the Lord is really looking beyond the fairness of this world. And I think that's often why that question comes up. Why did this happen? Why does someone have this disability? Comes up because there's this thought that it's not fair. It's not fair that someone should not have access in the same way to the world. It's not fair that someone should be limited in this way. And much like all things, the Lord is looking to what is eternal. And so his world has these things that come up. And I think that looking even beyond the disabilities themselves, we do well when we look at how people treat each other around that, how the people who have disabilities work through that. And when you think about their spirits, that's really what the Lord is looking at. It's not fair, and I don't know why it happens, but I think I know where to look for proof that God is still working with us.
People throughout history have gone as far as to think, I did something wrong or somebody else did something wrong, and because of that, I'm born with this problem. In fact, Jesus even addresses that directly. People say, why was this man born blind to Jesus? Was it because he sinned, or was it because his parents sinned? And Jesus says, well, neither. He was born blind so that the glory of God might be manifested. And I think that actually that answer is not always the right answer, but I think it can be comforting.
As someone pointed out to me, yes, being born blind is a disadvantage in life, materially. I want to emphasize that, materially. But being born poor is also materially a disadvantage. Being born less academically apt is a disadvantage materially. Being born not 7 feet tall is a disadvantage materially if you want to be a professional basketball player. I will never be a professional basketball player. I will also never be a jet fighter, a professional singer, a lot of things. I wasn't born with those capabilities. I have different capabilities. Now, because I'm not 7 feet tall, I am my height. So I actually have different advantages. I don't want to tell someone who is born blind or born with some other serious disadvantage, material disadvantage, that it's nothing. But we know that good comes from it.
For people who are born with disabilities, and I think we're all born with shortcomings of different kinds, it can be a reminder that maybe we're being asked not really to dwell on the disabilities, but to dwell on the good that can come out of them. I can't tell you how many times growing up I heard the idea that the hard things I was going through would someday enable me to better help other people. Well, you know, as I grow into adulthood, I find that that's true. The challenges that I have to face enable me to be more empathetic, enable me to be able to better relate to other people, and give me something to offer other people. And that, I think, is God's goodness, the glory of God, working through the difficulties, working through the shortcomings.
But now that gets to the bit of a tougher answer. Happiness doesn't come from having all the capabilities, from having all the money, or from having the car you want, or from having the memory you want. Happiness comes from obeying the Lord and loving the neighbor and being useful. And since pretty much anybody can do that, the tough answer is no disability keeps somebody from being happy. But you see, once you say that, now you're heartless. Because the other side of that has to be the great compassion to help people, because that's what we're all designed to do. Now, you don't want to fall into that fallacy of thinking there are people with disabilities so that I can help them. That's not what we mean. We mean everybody has a limitation on what they're able to do. Everything from the time and place they're born, to their height, to their genetic code, to who they spent second grade with. So it's a sliding scale. It's not like some people have disabilities and some people are fine. If you look around, nobody's fine. The trick is to figure out that a person is somebody who is born in the image and hopefully the likeness of the divine. And so they can want good, they can think truth, and they can do useful things. And that's what makes them a person. Perhaps the lesson we get when we look around at all the shapes and sizes and capabilities and circumstances and even decisions is that people are almost as infinitely varied as the universe and almost as infinitely varied as God's love and mercy. Because I kind of think that's what we see when we look around at all the differences.
I really do believe the world's imperfect. And I also believe this, that God's heart is always the first to break. And when we have challenges in our life, when certain things don't work a certain way, you know, it's a chance for us to just keep moving forward and understand God's there with us too. And maybe what we can learn through that, maybe what we can learn through these kind of occasions where we have to face these things, is just this. God's love is never transactional. I think that's so key. Like a lot of churches will hold God's love as transactional. In other words, if you do the right thing or you do the wrong thing, either you get blessed or you get cursed. And that can include right down to disabilities, which is just mortifying to even think that. But what love is instead is love is transformative. And what can happen in those circumstances, and I've certainly seen it many times, is that love can transform really hard situations into something that actually is part of divine providence and part of something that helps us all draw a little closer to God and a little closer to each other.
I knew a little girl who had a condition called Odio. Odio is an extremely, very rare genetic condition that is more rare than Down syndrome. And she is the most disabled person I ever knew. And she grew up in a very rural part of town and to very lower middle income family. and a family that you would say, oh, they have every disadvantage that you could possibly imagine an American family would have. Why do they have to struggle with having this daughter? And I was going into their house to essentially get to know them and try and write a grant letter to get them some money to help them out. Which means I got to interview this family. And the thing I learned, because I got to hang out with the girl, who's like 8, is she was just a magical, angelic presence everywhere she went. And her mom and dad knew it. And they didn't have a high academic idea of what it meant to have angels in their lives. They had one in their living room. And it was just amazing to be around. And yeah, it's really hard. I'm not going to pretend it's not. But I am incredibly blessed that I got to go into that living room. And I would hate to think of a world that didn't have those blessings in it.
So, what do you think? Comment below and let us know. A like or subscribe would go a long way too. If you're interested in discussing spirituality more personally, check out grandhumanproject.org to find a small group that's right for you. Or visit newchurch.org, where you can find church locations, news, resources, and much more. Thanks for watching, and God bless.